Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to continue the topic of financing in commercial real estate. In particular, today we're going to talk about debt yield. Let's get started. So this will be a short and sweet video. On the agenda is really just defining what is debt yield, and then we'll go through a quick example to help illustrate how we apply debt yield, or how you as a borrower can understand and try to negotiate debt yield. So first, what is debt yield? Formulaically, debt yield is this relationship or ratio between net operating income and the loan amount. So one more time, NOI divided by the amount that you are borrowing, or the amount that the lender is giving you or lending. Now you may look at this and feel like this is an oddly familiar equation. Maybe this is reminiscent of like a cap rate on the buy side, right? And that is one of the reasons why a lot of folks will describe the debt yield as the lender's cap rate. So instead of taking NOI divided by price, they're taking NOI divided by loan amount. And this is an important measure for them, right? Because this helps them determine affordability. Can you really afford the loan? Are you generating enough income to help support that loan? Now, what I think is critical here is why is this even a metric altogether, right? And I think one way for you to think about it is, again, coming back to this cap rate concept. If the lender were to give you a certain amount of money and you default, and they take that property back from you through the foreclosure process, they now became the owner of the property and, at least in concept, start to collect that same NOI that you could have. And this is why that debt yield component of that phrase is important. This is the yield that the lender would have earned if they took the property back to you relative to the loan amount that they lent, instead of the price that you paid. And so this is an important measure for them because it helps them determine affordability, but it also, to a degree, helps them understand the yield that they could earn if they lent on this property and ultimately became the owner of it. Now, one important distinction between debt yield and other metrics in commercial real estate lending is that the debt yield ignores factors, negotiations, or games that are played with interest rate, amortization term, or loan to value. So what I think is really important here is that we keep this piece in mind, right? As borrowers, we are oftentimes negotiating LTV, right? What is the appraised value? How much value do we have in the property? And trying to negotiate that as high as possible, right? Or maybe we're trying to negotiate interest rate, trying to negotiate it to be as low as possible. Or amortization term. Oftentimes, if affordability is the question, we're trying to extend amortization out as long as possible. Debt yield is one of these metrics that helps ignore all those negotiations to really own in on, can you afford the loan relative to the amount and the income that you're earning. So let's take a look at a quick example just to walk into this. So let's say you have net operating income of $1.5 million. The lender says, you know what, we have a minimum debt yield requirement of 9%. Okay, so $1.5 million divided by 9% gives us this this $16,667,000 loan estimate. So you'll notice that there was no payment calculation, there was no reference to property value, there was no interest rate conceived or talked about here. This is really just about the debt yield as a metric by itself to limit how much loan can be given. So let's take a look at what happens as debt yield changes. So let's assume debt yield, instead of going from 9% to result in a $16 and change million loan, what if it goes up to 10%? So now $1.5 million divided by 10% gives us $15 million. So in the same way that higher cap rates result in lower prices, higher debt yields result in lower loan amounts. And this is really important, especially in the climate that we're in today, where lenders are beginning to increase some of their covenants in loans or some of their kind of gating items to make sure that they are being more conservative and that they are lending on properties that can really afford that loan amount. So the way that this will typically be represented to you is that the lender will issue a term sheet, right? And that term sheet will represent items like how much are they lending you and under what terms. But typically they'll have a covenants section that says you need to maintain a loan to value ratio of no more than X, whatever that is, or minimum debt service coverage ratio. A lot of lenders will also include a minimum debt yield. And so one more time, the higher the debt yield, the lower the loan amount. So I'm seeing a lot of lenders these days creep up from a minimum debt yield of 9, 9.5 to 10, 10.5 to 11, 11.5. They're increasing that debt yield to reduce the amount that they lend as a tool to be more conservative during uncertain times. So just as a quick recap, the debt yield is one of many metrics, one of the big three, if you want to think of it like that lenders use to help evaluate how much to lend on a property. In particular, this is a measure of affordability, and the ratio clues us in on its usefulness to a lender. The debt yield is NOI divided by loan amount, and it helps them understand what the yield to the lender will be should they foreclose and take the property back and become the new owner. It is oftentimes applied to help them gauge, again, affordability, and to help them limit loan proceeds during uncertain times. So increasing the debt yield will limit or lower the amount that they lend. So that does it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.